All right, so at this time, before we jump into this part, I just want to do a quick check to see what you guys are thinking about at this time. I want you to type in to the box to everybody, one or two strengths that you saw that the teacher had. The grade level is 6th grade, so we found that out on page 3 when we read the school context. So type in one or maybe two strengths that the teacher has. And they can be big, general, or they can be very quick and specific. Good, so you guys are saying student engagement, right? They're all sort of with her throughout the whole lesson. I see a lot of you saying that her classroom management was also a strength. And good class culture, right? A very positive class culture. Good positive reinforcement, yes. Also contributing to good class culture. Good. All right, so I think that all of you are pretty much on the same page with that. Take a minute now to think about one or two areas of growth for this teacher. They can come off of that list you see there. And remember, this is just from the video, so just your initial thoughts. Good. A lot of you guys are saying pacing is off. We will talk about that. Circulation, which is has to do with her checks for understanding. Right? She does not circulate, which makes it hard to check for understanding. That's addressing different learning needs. Good, Sandra. Differentiation, I see that again. Jamie, you also picked up on the pacing. The objective was 20 minutes in. Okay, good. So I think you guys are definitely on the right track, so you can feel good about that. Even though we did this after looking at the video and we haven't looked at any other documents, it's good to have a sense of sort of what you're thinking about at the end of the video, and then you can go into the documents and see if there are any documents that are sort of corroborating your evidence. So if you're saying that classroom management is a strength from the video, when you're looking through the documents, try to look for a document that also says that the classroom management was a strength. It could show up in the teacher reflection with the teacher telling you that she's good with classroom management or classroom culture. It could also show up in the walkthrough notes, right? Which would be the administrator saying that she's good with classroom management or routines. Okay, if you are saying that her pacing is off, you want to look again in the teacher reflection, maybe in the lesson plan and in the walkthrough notes to see if that's a trend for her. Okay? Great, you guys. I'm really happy with what you shared just now. I think you're definitely on the right track. All right, at this time, we're going to be looking at some of the other documents, so make sure you have your PDF pulled up. What I want you to think about is this second question. To what extent was the instructional plan effective in promoting student engagement and student learning? So this is specifically asking you about the lesson plan, so you have to look at the lesson plan, okay? You can also look at the video because the video tells you a lot about student engagement, right? You can see if students are engaged and you can pull evidence. And then I also want you to look at the teacher reflection for this question. Okay, so I know you guys already browsed through, but take a bit of time to look at those three artifacts. Remember that for this sub-question, you will be writing about a paragraph. But for this, I just want you to write down your notes, and then we'll do a short partner talk to sort of hash it out. It's write down your ideas to answer this question. It's question number 2, and I'll have that up on the screen for you. All right, at this time, I would like you to private chat your partner. And what I would like you to talk about is whether you think the instructional plan was effective, partially effective, or ineffective. Okay, so those are your three options. It says to what extent. You need to answer it was effective, it was ineffective, or it was partially effective. Okay, in promoting student engagement, student engagement and student learning. Okay, so go ahead and private chat. I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to chat, and then we'll talk about it together, and we will go over my sample report. Right. So we talked a little bit about student engagement. A lot of you were saying that the student engagement was strong in this lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what my sample response was. If you have something a little bit different, don't be too freaked out by it. The main thing is you do need to be able to back up what you're saying with multiple forms of evidence. And one tip that I do have to you is as you're going through the documents, as you're writing down notes, you need to put in parentheses on your whiteboard what document that piece of evidence came from. So if you're going to say teacher has strong culture, don't just write that down as a note. Make sure that you put in parentheses where that came from so you don't have to go back and try to remember where you got that evidence from. Always write it down as you're taking notes. So I stated that the teacher's instruction plan was thoughtfully prepared and aligned to Math Standard 4.NF.1. However, there was a discrepancy between the written plan and the observed lesson. For instance, the teacher planned to gradually release responsibility to her students. This was in the lesson plan. She planned to give some direct instruction, practice as a class, and then she planned to give them independent practice time. But her pacing was really behind. She did not have time at the end of the lesson to independently assess students through the use of an exit slip. So what happened is that she actually spent way too much time in the beginning of the lesson going over the homework, and that wasn't supposed to take up as much time as it did. So it was the evidence in parentheses stated what document it came from. All right, and then the instructional plan, I thought, was effective in promoting student engagement. You can talk about the activities as well as the materials stated in the instructional plan. And I said why. Make sure you state why it's effective, ineffective, or partially effective. Because the effective classroom management, the positive classroom culture, the strong routines and procedures, and the balance between teacher input and student processing and work time. Okay, so that was my 2 little paragraphs about that answered that question. Bianca, go ahead. Question on this part. Yes. So, okay, there's 2 questions here. So in terms of pacing, I talk about that as one of her growth areas. So I'm going to sort of wait to talk about pacing until the end. You can definitely include that in this section. So I think it's fine. It's totally fine if you said that it was partially effective and you noted sort of that little piece that was off for her. Yeah, so I think that if you guys are thinking that she's effective or partially effective, you're totally on the right track, okay? And then, Alondra, I want to say, you're saying that you saw sentence frames and visuals, but not evident in the video. You can definitely say that. I think, if I remember correctly, the sentence frames had to do with providing sort of differentiation for certain students. So that piece, I would say, I'm just going to go back. I'm sorry, you guys. That piece would answer this question. Describe how the teacher addressed variations in learning needs. And what you would say is that she actually had a good plan written up to address the needs of her students with special needs or different needs, but none of that was sort of evident in the video. So I would be careful where you talk about that. If it's specifically having to do with students with different learning needs, save it for this paragraph. But I think that's a really good catch, and you should definitely, if there's a discrepancy between the lesson plan and the video, you should definitely point that out. Okay, so good catch on that one. Okay, let's zoom back forward a little bit here. Now let's jump into the second bucket, which is assessing student learning. We're going to talk about this first question. How effectively did the teacher monitor student learning? And how effectively did she provide feedback to how well is she sort of okay, so you can take a look at the video and the lesson plan for this. If you want to include other documents, if you've already seen some evidence, you can get those as well. So I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock for you to jot down your ideas about this. Remember, you are arguing that she's effective, partially effective, or ineffective. Those are your sort of 3 choices to go with. All right, at this time, I would like you to chat your partner. And I want to chat with your partner if you feel like the monitoring student learning was ineffective and if providing feedback was effective or ineffective. Okay, so those two things, I want you to chat with your partner. I'm going to put another few minutes on the clock here. And then we will go over this together. I'm not going to give you a full 5 minutes. I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to chat with your partner, and then we'll come back together. Go ahead. All right, let's come back together. I want to first talk about monitoring student learning. So how well did the teacher monitor students' learning? Remember that your assess student mastery, that's going to be the second question. So make sure that you are talking about how well she monitors student learning. Effective, ineffective, partially effective. Let's talk about that. Good, good, very specific evidence, Jamie. Good, so I think a lot of you are on the right track saying partially effective. It's not fantastic, it's not horrible. If you're gonna say totally ineffective, I think that it really needs to be glaringly ineffective. So I think if you're saying partially, you're really on the right track here. Now let's talk a little bit about providing feedback to students. What did you notice about her feedback? Good job, Luis. You're pulling from a lot of different evidence there. All right, you guys, good job with all of that. I do want to reiterate that for the feedback portion, and whenever you're talking about types of questions that the teacher is asking, I do really urge you to try to find some quotes. Even if they're not exact quotes, it's okay. But if you can pull a few great quotes out of the video, it's a really, really good form of evidence to include. All right, so I said the teacher monitored learning through questioning, pair discussion, and circulation, recall, and calculation. For example, she asked, can 67 go into 5, and what do I do next? There are only a few instances in which the teacher asked high-level questions. For instance, she asked, can somebody tell me why these two fractions are equivalent? And why are 3/5 and 6/10 equivalent? The teacher gave feedback to students that reflected their progress towards mastering the learning objectives. She said, if you're doing it right, if for number 7 you got not proportional. I think in addition to this, I would add that her circulation was minimal. A lot of you guys picked up on that she did not circulate until the very end, and that a lot of her feedback, just because of the nature of the pacing of the lesson, a lot of her feedback, was very general. Let's see. Clarified with the student, helping find a location. Good. So I think that you guys have a lot of very specific things to say. Remember that being specific about your findings is going to help you with your score. Sometimes it's a little easier to be just general, but the more specific you are, the better your score is going to be. And if you can elaborate, for example, when I said that these questions required students to explain their thinking and justifying their responses, if you can elaborate and give explanations, then that's also going to help your score. Okay, so I think you guys are definitely on the right track, even if you had different types of evidence than I did, even if you argued slightly differently than I did, that's totally fine. I think that you guys are pulling some really great pieces of evidence out. All right, the last 3 minutes, what we're gonna do, we already talked about the strengths and areas of improvement, but what I want you to do now is I want you to identify one specific area of improvement that you want to focus on. And after you choose your area of improvement, I want you to think of a minimum of 2 strategies that you would recommend to this teacher to improve in that one area. In the actual CPACE, you're going to have to do this twice. But for today, choose one area of improvement and think of 2 strategies. You don't need to go back to any of the documents at this time. The only thing you might want to look at is page 11 on that little chart there. And if you want to look over your notes, you can, but you don't need to cite anything in this section. Okay, so I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock for you to get started on this task.